Imagine you're in an accident. You break your back and you need to learn to walk again. But you don't just learn to walk, you learn to cycle. And you cycle so fast, you break your own world record, securing gold for your country in the Paralympic Games. My guest today on this special edition of The Mental Space is an absolute inspiration. And I'm also delighted to say he is a judge for our Mentl Awards 2023, which aims to hero organisations, public and private sector, which help people thrive. My guest today is none other than Mark Colbourne MBE. Mark, welcome to the Mental Space podcast.
Thank you ever so much, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Now, normally I'll give more of a potted history, but your story is incredible. I wonder if you can, for our audience, just take us back to the accident which kind of changed the direction of your life. Just kind of take us through who Mark was the day before the accident, and then what actually happened on that day.
Yes, well, I was working in Cardiff, in my home country of Wales, for a PLC company, senior accounts manager, company car, nice salary. I worked Monday to Fridays. I'd just become divorced 2 years earlier. And I guess, for me then, life was just almost a normal working life. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I'd qualified as a paragliding pilot. And we'd arranged for the weekend to actually fly as a club over the Gower Peninsula, which is the South Wales area of Wales. And we were all looking forward to it. 21 paragliding pilots, really excited for the bank holiday weekend, because it was the 2nd of May, 2009. So we all woke up, as you can imagine, drove down to Swansea. We all had breakfast in the bistro, literally overlooking Rhossili Beach, which is a 3-mile beach, in the Gower. So it was just a normal Saturday, and we'd arranged to have maybe 4.5 to 5 hours flight time through the day. Conditions are perfect, 21 degrees, blue sky, 12, maybe 14 mile an hour headwind coming in off the Irish Sea, and conditions are perfect, And then at 5 p.m, one of my friends said to me while we were all sat on the hillside, should we go back up? Should we go back up maybe for just the last half an hour before the sun starts to set and the wind drops, and that's the end of flying for the day? Maybe in me, I said, okay, let's go. So we hitched up the harnesses, ran off the top of the hillside, and we just started soaring across, the top ridge of Rhossili. So picture the scene. There's 20 pilots, all flying, all, enjoying the moment. And it's a very cathartical feeling when you fly, when your feet leave the ground and you get that Peter Pan moment, is how I explain it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it. It's an amazing feeling. And then maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes later, as I'm soaring across the top ridge, maybe 15 meters above the ground, focusing on turning left to face the Irish Sea to get more lift off the hillside, to almost bring myself around maybe another, maybe 1 kilometer back to the landing site.
Yeah.
And as I turned the canopy, I felt the canopy flutter, which is normal, obviously in the breeze. And as I pulled on my left brake and turned to face the Irish Sea, my whole canopy just collapsed. A complete freak of nature, maybe in the wrong place at the wrong time, possibly, And I flew into what they call a crosswind, which is 2 air streams that fight for the same space. And it just completely blew out my canopy. So now you're thinking, I'm 15 meters above the ground. Mm-hmm. Everything almost stops instantly because your brain recalculates what's going to happen next. And even now, sitting in this chair, 14 years on, I can see the ground coming up and accelerating, getting faster and faster. And within that 2 seconds, I just remember thinking, just prepare. That's all I can remember thinking, is just prepare. And I'll never forget looking down and seeing my flying boots, hitting the grass with this almighty thud. And to add insult to injury, the wind, which is, like I said, 14, 15 mile an hour at that point, was swirling across the top ridge and it reinflated my canopy, which I'm attached to.
Yeah.
I'm fully conscious, having just fell 15 meters onto the grass, thankfully landed on my feet, because if I'd landed on my bottom, the pressure would have gone up through my spine and probably killed me instantly. So to be dragged for, I don't know, maybe 80, 90 meters, uncontrollably, this is almost like being in a boxing match with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm 85 kilos. Okay. I'm not a tough guy, but that's how it felt, just being in this fight, And I'll never forget seeing the grass, the sky, the grass, the sky, the grass, and just being smashed to onto the ground until after maybe, I don't know, 10 seconds or however long it was. I finally stopped tumbling, and I'm lying on the floor and I'm just staring up at this beautiful blue sky, catching my breath and thinking to myself, that was close. That was really close. Because even though I'd gone through that 15, 20 seconds of uncontrollableness, I wasn't in any pain. So I'm lying on the floor thinking, wow, okay, I need to sit up now. I need to pull in the paragliding lines, because that's what you're trained to do.
Okay.
To stop the paragliding canopy from reinflating, but in my case, it was too late. It had already happened. And I tried to sit up, and I remember thinking to myself, I must be caught on something, because I couldn't get my shoulders off the grass, And it was almost like some, big bloke pushing you onto the grass, And then as I looked down my body, I could just see both my legs were twisted, almost like pipe cleaners, okay? And I'm looking and I'm thinking, that's a bit odd. They shouldn't look like that. And I mean, they're twisted, literally round each other. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, I broke both my legs. Because they were mangled, And what I wanted to do was to turn myself onto my side into the recovery position, just in case I passed out and I vomited. Because obviously then you choke on your vomit, But I couldn't turn myself over because nothing was working below the waist. And then I thought, maybe I should just keep still. Maybe I should just not move, because I could see the other pilots above me. And there's one gentleman who I'm so grateful for called Sergeant Dennis Lewis. And Sergeant Lewis is an ex-paragliding instructor from the Special Services of the SAS in the UK. Retired. And I was so grateful that Dennis was there that day. He saw me crash. He looped down, almost put his own life at risk, as a speed inverted rescue. Landed, unclipped his harness, ran over, as quick as he possibly could. And he takes one look at me, and I'm just blinking in complete shock. And he says to me, oh my gosh, are you still alive? I said, yeah, but Dennis, I can't feel my legs. So he immediately goes into medic mode, straight on the radio, pilot down. And that's when the Wales Air Ambulance arrived, probably within about 10 or 11 minutes, to do what they do best. They do the check, stabilize the patient, neck collar, chest brace, morphine line into my veins. And probably within about 25 to 30 minutes of stabilizing me onto the spinal board, and then I'm airlifted off, by helicopter, to Swansea Hospital. And all that happened within, I'd say, less than an hour, So they say life begins at 40, Scott, and it certainly did for me.
When in that first hour, or maybe it wasn't even in that first hour, when did the emotions begin to kick in? Because to start with, you're in shock. To start with, you're going through a process, which I'm absolutely amazed you're going through that process. I don't know whether I'd have lost it or not in your position, but at what point did the emotion of what was happening kick in, and what were those emotions?
I think the first in-depth feeling of anger was not being able to turn over on the floor, knowing that I'd done something pretty serious, because nothing was working. Couldn't turn. Obviously, my legs weren't working. I finally grabbed my flying trousers and lifted my right leg off my left leg, because, I was totally paralyzed. just to get myself comfortable, lean back and just wait. You know, as I said, Dennis came down. But I think for any of your listeners, for any of your audience that understands the Kubler-Ross change curve of the emotions and feelings that we go through when we go through change as human beings, and we all go through it. And the first stage is denial. So I'm lying on the floor thinking, what the hell have I done? Why can't I move my legs? You know? And then I think the second phase for me was shock. Was like, oh my gosh, I've done something pretty serious here. And then obviously get into hospital and just going through that process, you know, in hospital. And a big thanks to the NHS for just the service I received, you know, the care I received that night, straight into an MRI, straight into an X-ray, and being told that night by the doctor, you know, when they bring the envelope with the X-ray. And I remember him showing me the X-ray and just saying, look, I'm really sorry, but you've broken your back. I said, sorry? Because I didn't think it broke my back. I didn't know what breaking your back felt like, you know? And he said, look, I'm really sorry, you know, but I have more bad news. I said, what? He said, we don't have a consultant surgeon here to operate on you. He's away on holidays. I've rang him and rang him and rang him. His phone is off. There's no spinal surgeon here to operate on you. And you suddenly think, how bad can it get? I've broke my back. The service that I grew up with and I love, and I'll tell you something about the Naira and Bevan in a second, for anybody that knows the history of the NHS. And then as I'm lying in this hospital bed, having given, you know, the hospital all my details, and I mean, Scott, it's this quiet. You know, it's silent in the ward. And it's now maybe 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. So I'd given the hospital my parents' phone number to say, look, contact my parents. Just say, look, Mark's okay, but he's had an accident, but he's okay. So I'm lying in this hospital bed. I've just been told I broke my back. And I can hear these footsteps and a voice. And I will never, ever forget the feeling I had in my stomach when I heard that voice. And it was my mum. And I thought to myself, now I'm in for it.
Yeah, you're in trouble now.
Now I'm in for it. And I could hear my mum saying to the nurse, where is he? Where is he? I'll give him bloody paragliding. Where is he? So she walks into the ward, and you can imagine now, only child, no brothers or sisters, lying in this hospital bed with a neck collar on, you know. And my mum saying, well, what have you done? And the nurse then saying, look, you know, unfortunately he's broke his back. And it was like, what? You know, this young kid who would, you know, completely embrace sport, health and well-being all my life. It's been my driver all through my life. To now literally almost getting killed, doing something I enjoyed, you know. And my mum was crying, I was crying, she's trying to console me, I'm trying to console her, saying everything's going to be okay. And my dad leaned over, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said to me, I told you to be careful, didn't I, Mr. Action Man? And I said, Dad, now is not the time, please. Now is not the time. You know, if you're going to give me a telling off, just wait.
Keep to the morning.
Just wait. And that was the end of one life and the start of another life, you know.
That almost sounds too simple. A demarcation. So what was the morning like? The morning after, the day before? You know, when does the realization that there's consequences for you as Mark and your life moving forward from what just happened yesterday?
I think it's dealing with the here and now.
Yeah.
You know, as human beings, we are the only living organism / species on the planet that knows there's a tomorrow. No other animal or primate knows there's a tomorrow. They feel it, you know, through the changes of the seasons, but they don't know there's a tomorrow. They don't know there's a Christmas or a New Year's Day or a bank holiday. They don't know those days because obviously we invented time and we invented the calendar. So I think the deep answer to your question is just being grateful to wake up, breathe in. You know, let's go right down deep to the basics here. opening my eyes, actually seeing nurses, doctors around me, and just feeling safe. That was the feeling that I felt. I felt in a good place because I was safe. I didn't have a broken back in the middle of a jungle.
Yeah.
With no, care around me then, And I think it was just that feeling that morning when the doctor came back and said, look, we need to take you to Cardiff, which is 60 miles away. We'll put you into an ambulance. The ambulance will, of course, drive very slowly, blue lights, all the way up the M4 motorway in South Wales to take you, to the university hospital. And they have surgeons there waiting. They'll do another MRI and another X-ray, and then they'll look after you. So I was literally, blue lighted, all the way to Cardiff to the Heath Hospital. To arrive in the hospital, have another MRI, have another X-ray, to be told that day they couldn't operate because my spinal cord was so swollen after breaking T12, which is the vertebrae that I split, that I had to wait until the inflammation went down before they could operate. So I literally had to wait a whole week, just lying in this hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, not knowing if I was ever going to leave hospital. Was I ever going to have a life, a job? Because you're going into the unknown, And then 1 week later, I had a 3-hour spinal operation. So I've got 6 pins in my back. So they pinned me through T10, T11 and L1. So they've fixated me through, the area around my belly button area, So you can imagine, the security loved me in the airport.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
When I walked through like Charlie Chaplin and set all the alarms off, So that's a light-hearted touch,
Week like though, because you're in limbo. You don't know if you're ever going to walk again. You don't know if you're going to get out of hospital again. What kept you going? Or was it just you were in limbo?
Definitely my parents.
Yeah.
Definitely my daughter. My daughter at the time, what was she, 15, 16? She understood the physicality of what had happened, but she knew that, I guess, I have this inner warrior spirit that I've always had ever since I was a kid. And I remember my late father always saying to my mother that Mark doesn't have a stop button, and they thought there was something wrong with me when I was a kid because I could never keep still, whereas other children would sit in front of the TV for hours and hours and, do their thing. I'd be out cycling, going to swimming lessons and playing rugby and football and just loved the feeling of movement. And it was only then later on in life, when I joined British Cycling and meeting Professor Steve Peters, who's been a huge catalyst in my new career as a coach and a speaker, to understand how you manage that dopamine excitement,
I want to come to that part of your life and the lessons that you learned from Steve Peters, because it's utterly fascinating. And I think it's information that everybody needs in their life. I just want to focus a little bit more, just the days, weeks, months after the injury. Like, how do you get from the hospital bed to even getting on a bike?
Yeah, so the shortened story is I spent 94 days paralyzed on my back, after the operation. Probably around a month of just being turned by the nurses every 3 hours. Okay, so imagine going to sleep at 10 p.m. and then a nurse then gently tapping you, it's around 1 a.m. Mark, we need to turn you, because obviously with the scar, the operational scarring, they needed to keep it clean and aid so it would heal. So for weeks and weeks, I literally would just be turned, every sort of 3 or 4 hours. And going back to what I said just now, I felt in a safe place. And I think the skill of thinking logically, not emotionally, was always there. I just didn't know I had it. And then after 94 days of being in this hospital bed and being cared for by wonderful people, and this is the praise I have for the NHS, And then finally, after 94 days, the doctor said, okay, look, we need to get you out of this bed. We need to get you upright. We'll put you onto a frame, And I remember standing up for the first time and literally I couldn't stop shaking because of, the blood pressure problems that were going on. So they finally put me into this, just a wheelchair. And then obviously they took me over to the gymnasium, gave me the frame again to literally start to be functional, And because I have drop foot in both feet, which basically means that both my feet don't work through the nerve damage. So I had to wear a special set of orthosis to fix my feet, to then almost start to retrain the muscles that didn't work, okay, to call on the secondary muscles that weren't responsible for walking. But because my primary muscles don't work, glutes, hamstrings, calves and feet, I'm now asking my quads and my hip flexors to do other muscles work, if that makes sense. So it's retraining, know. And that was 6 to 8 weeks of just constant daily practice. But my point is, after spending probably 25 years in sport, albeit as a hobby, that was okay for me.
Yeah.
I didn't mind doing the work.
As a physical challenge.
Oh, yeah. I didn't like the feeling of looking in the mirror and seeing me walking. That broke my heart. And that's probably another conversation again. The human trauma of seeing yourself walking almost like it's not you, if that makes sense,
So let's stay with that though. Like, how did you deal with that emotional side? Because it sounds like, as you say, you're quite a sort of process, logical thinker, but you're being turned every 3 hours in this time that you can't move at all. How did you not lose heart, or what were the emotions that went through you at times? Like, how did you keep going? Was it just, there's another tomorrow? I
kept thinking to myself, it could have been worse. Okay, technically I shouldn't be here. I should be in a cemetery with flowers over my head. And that's the reality. I shouldn't be here. So to wake up, open my eyes, see people, touch people, hold people's hands, and actually be alive. And I know that may sound a bit taboo, but it's true, So the gratitude of being put onto a walk-in frame with orthosis and crutches and being put onto a set of parallel bars to literally start to walk and retrain all over again. That was a challenge, rather than poor me, rather than thinking below the line. I actually started thinking above the line, thinking, well, this is much better than lying in that hospital bed for 16, 17 hours a day, And I think the biggest wake-up call for me was many, many, many years before that, where my dad said to me, I think I was about 10, about the process of life, okay? That we're born, we live, and we pass on. And I said to my dad, what do you mean? I was 10. And he said, well, just remember that one day in the future, tomorrow will be your last day. I looked at my mum, and my mum just was like, what do you say? Just the realism and the realization that life is actually really short.
Yeah.
It's really short. In the grand scheme of things, It's really short. So every morning waking up thinking, okay, another day in paradise.
Yeah.
Albeit with a disability, with a broken back, lower leg paralysis. But surely that's much better than not being alive.
Sounds like you're sponsored by Phil Collins at this point.
Yeah,
Gen Z, millennials, you'll have to look him up.
Yes.
He was a long time ago.
Yes.
It was a number one for a while. It's fascinating. And when you say that kind of that gratitude and the realization that life is short, it feels like that's something that even to this day, not many of us actually truly realize. I read a book recently, and I love the book, and the title of the book is called 4,000 Weeks by a guy called Oliver Berkman. And the whole point of that is that if you live 80 years, you get 4,000 weeks.
Yeah.
And when I read that, and when you read the passage, it goes, that's how much time you've got.
Yeah,
and if you think about it, do the maths, and lots of people will go, no, that's nonsense. Like, think about it, 52 weeks. If you live to 100, you've got 5,200.
Yeah.
And 80 years is endless.
Yeah.
It never ends. But I can see 4,000 weeks on the calendar.
Yeah.
And I'm now more than 2,600 in. And it's almost like a Shawshank Redemption type quote, isn't it? Like get busy living rather than busy dying.
Yeah.
But I think so few of us have actually woken up to that or have that realization.
But that's why when I meet people, and I'm very privileged, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, to be living in Dubai, making a difference in the Middle East, giving back, that's just part of my vision. To know that moving forward is great, but don't forget to enjoy the here and now.
Yeah.
Because that's where the memories, the emotions, the friendships are built upon. And that's another thing my dad used to say is that, whatever you work for, you can't take it with you. Okay, so technically the house, the car, the watch, the shoes, the holiday, home, whatever, you only borrow it. You only borrow it. What you do take with you is the friendships, the emotions, the feelings, the experiences. That's what we take with us, So I think that time in hospital, was very cathartical. It was a big wake-up call for me, a big wake-up call. Knowing that I always had that athlete mindset and the skills to be a professional athlete, I just never had the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so fast forward time again. Fast forward through, I guess, months of physiotherapy?
Years
of physiotherapy.
Year and a half.
When did you first get on the bicycle for the first time as Mark 2.0 as opposed to Mark from his old life? And then how did that journey leap into being a Paralympian?
Yeah, I think excuse me. I think the whole process starts with those small little acorns. And the last month in hospital, because they wanted to get me functional to leave, okay? That's the whole process of a hospital journey, is to fix you, get you ready to move back into society, So they want you to go home. Not that they are going to miss you, of course they are, but they just want you to go home. So they sat me on one of these watt bikes, which is an indoor training bike. And I remember sitting on this bike, explaining to the physio and the OT that I'd ridden a bike since I was probably 5. I'd raced triathlon,
Okay.
So cycling for me was easy, albeit now retraining the muscles that do work to do the job, to do the work.
Yeah.
So as I'm sat on this bike, I never forget saying to Martin, who was the physio helper, I said, hang on a sec. If I start pushing these pedals, because my feet don't work, they're just going to flop into the chain. So I'm thinking health and safety. Oh, hang on then, he said. Yeah, you've got drop foot. Yeah, he said, hang on, stay there. I thought, well, I'm not going anywhere. So he goes to the cupboard and he comes back with a roller bandage. Okay? And they bandaged my feet to the pedals. So this was my very first experience of marginal gains. Think about it. The small differences.
They were your first clip-ons, were they?
Literally, bandage cleats, okay? To experience the small differences that make all the difference.
Yeah.
And I started pushing and pulling, just using my quads and hip flexors. And I literally went into the gym every day for probably a month, for like an hour, 2 hours. And I just thought, oh my gosh, the feeling of stepping onto that bike and bandaging my pedals is the same feeling for people who wear spectacles or contact lenses. As soon as you put those glasses on, you feel back in the room. You take them off, technically you're disabled. If you're visually impaired, you know. So I knew when I left hospital that, albeit with safety, I could get back onto the bike, and cycling or rowing at the time would be my gateway to get back to being fit and healthy, albeit with a disability. And my late father used to help me. I didn't go back to work, for a long time. And my dad would literally take me down to Abergavenny in South Wales, where it's really flat. He'd help me onto my bike, push me off, and he'd wait. He'd literally wait for me for like an hour or however long, and then help me back off the bike. And that, repeating the process, happened for probably the best part of 6 months, until I met a chiropractor one day, completely by chance. And we were actually participating in a charity bike ride for the Wales Air Ambulance. So we were raising money for this organization that saved my life. So I met this chiropractor by chance, and he says to me, "What's wrong with your legs?" So I explained I'd broken my back, I've got lower leg paralysis, but I can cycle. So after this 20-minute conversation, he says to me, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "Are you training for London 2012 for the Paralympics?" I said, "No. Why the hell would I do that?" He said, "I think you should." And that was just the light bulb moment. And it was thanks to, Dr. Ben Matthews, who planted that seed. And I just thought, what if I can get to London 2012? It's 2 years away.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that's...
But what if? What a journey just to get there. So at the time I had a cycling coach in South Wales called Neil Smith. And I went back after we'd raised the money for the air ambulance. And I said to Neil, I'd like to commit. Okay. Ring British Cycling. Give him a call and tell him I'm serious. I want to commit, So Neil had that conversation, and obviously then British Cycling, came along, and they were like, wow, just so much power, so much ability. As I said, no stop button.
Yeah.
And that was the door that opened, to join British Cycling in 2011, and just start to live out the childhood dream. Because I'd always wanted to be a pro athlete.
Yeah.
Never had the opportunity. Even my dad said, "Don't be so bloody foolish. Just go and work in the police or work for the council. Just go and get a job." Because that's what they did back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then 2012 Paralympic Games. Just talk us through this.
Yes. I guess the feeling when I joined British Cycling was, what can I achieve? Okay. Because the expectations of just getting to British Cycling and being part of it was now a true reality. So what's next? I've always had this challenge mindset, but at the same time to always give back. And I'll never forget joining British Cycling and just being told by the best of the best, just be coachable. Just be open to be coachable, okay? Learn from the best, the physiologist, the biomechanics, the nutritionist, the strength coaches. My coach at British Cycling was a lovely gentleman, a wonderful gentleman called Tom Stanton, and we almost became like brothers, And I'll never forget winning the World Championships in Los Angeles on the track, which was unfortunately the same week as my dad passed away with stomach cancer. So you can imagine now I've gone through this trauma of breaking my back, my parents almost nearly losing me, to then being told I'm being selected by British Cycling, which was like, wow, okay. To then be told that my hero, my go-to guy, which was my dad, now had stomach cancer. And then literally within 5 to 6 months, he passed away. But that's life, isn't it? This is my point. The point is that we embrace today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Focus on it, plan for it, but don't really worry about it. So to go to Los Angeles and, win the World Championships on the track was probably the first part of the vision board tick. World champion, Coming back, attending my dad's funeral, you can imagine. So my poor old emotional scale is just doing this, And then in June 2012, being selected, for London, for probably the biggest sporting event on the planet, So apologies to any football fans out there. But it is, the Olympics and the Paralympics come around every 4 years for a reason, And it was just an amazing feeling for me as a human being when the whole country got behind us. And obviously in the UK, we had a Wimbledon winner.
Yep.
We had a Tour de France winner in Brad Wiggins, and then on to the Olympics, which I think was an amazing warm-up for the Paralympics. And then it was time for the whole world to watch the superhumans. Yeah. These individual athletes from all over the world with one arm, one leg, visually impaired, cerebral palsy, all these disabilities that people almost looked beyond the disability and they looked at the ability.
Yeah.
So yesterday, I'm going to share this with your audience, if it's okay. But yesterday, my friend who still races for Great Britain in the C4 category, which is one of the paracycling categories, broke the world record on the track for what they call the fly-in 200, okay? He didn't just break it, he just obliterated it, you know, to prove that this guy, whose name is Jody Cundy, who is a right leg amputee through the shin, okay, is only something like, I think it was 0.4 or 0.5 slower than Sir Chris Hoy in this event. Okay, it's a 200 meter.
That's a fairly high bar.
A fly-in 200 meter. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sir Chris, probably the best sprinter that ever lived, you know, on the track. And yet this guy who has a disability is only half a second behind him. Okay. Now Jody's a powerhouse. So to see him break this world record in the World Championships in Glasgow was an amazing achievement for him, you know. So I'm so happy for him. You know?
So you competed in your event, and this happened.
Yes. So this, as I said, was a childhood dream. I suppose in reality, never thought that it would happen. Mm-hmm. I always wanted it to happen. Okay, I really did, but didn't know, first of all, what it would take, how much work did I have to put in, first of all, just to get to London, as I said. But then when I won the World Championships, suddenly now I have this belief that almost anything is possible. I've survived breaking my back. I've just done thousands of miles of training to win the World Championships. Yeah. And now going into London, what's possible? And this is a big thanks to Professor Steve Peters about the art of giving 100%. Because when you know what 100% feels like, you can manage it. Okay? You can manage it. 101% doesn't exist. So when you give your best, you can only give your best. Okay? So going into London 2012, understanding the acceptance of giving 100%, but also accepting the outcome. So if you know in your heart that you've done your best, you can't beat yourself up over it, whether you win or whether you finish last. The pride and the achievement is knowing you gave your best. And there's a great poem that I recite now as an international speaker that's called The Man in the Glass. And it talks about and describes how being honest with yourself is more important than anything else. Okay, being transparent with yourself. So going into London, the coaches, Professor Peters, they all knew that I was going to give 100%, like every other athlete. So the only thing you have to wait for is the outcome, if that makes sense. So you go through the qualification rounds, go through all the training, all the prep, and it's meticulous. I mean, ultra meticulous, because it has to be. Because what's about to happen, as in the race or races, will only happen once. It's not a warm-up. Yeah. It's not, oh, can I have another go? Please. So going into the 31st of August 2012, I raced in qualification in the morning, and I broke the world record just to get into the final, which was 4 hours later, because you race twice in one day. And I'll never forget, you know, after, you know, resting in the afternoon and going through the process of, you know, warming down and then food and sleep and hydration and then getting yourself ready for 3 p.m., which was the time of the final, you know. So we've gone through all the process, warmed up, got myself ready, and then 3 p.m. they called my name and my number. Mark Colbourne, Great Britain, number 42, which was my age, which is a bit surreal, isn't it? Can you come to the start gate, you know, for the final? So there's 7,000 people in the velodrome. There was 1.2 million people on Channel 4 watching. So no pressure.
No pressure.
To step on...
I'd say a walk in the park, but more of a cycle in the park.
Yeah. To literally step onto the bike, you know, climb onto the bike, clip in my cycling shoes. And just, I kept thinking to myself, I've been waiting 30 years for this. Okay? So whatever's going to happen in the next 4 minutes, I'm just going to give it 100%. Even if they carry me off the track, I'm going to leave everything on the track, but in a scheduled way, in a processed way that's been practiced thousands of times. And I'll never forget my coach, Tom Stanton, coming up to me, because the commissaire won't raise his green flag until you give the nod, till you're ready.
Yeah.
And Tom saying to me, okay, Mark? I said, yeah. He said, are you ready? I said, yeah. He said, do this for your dad. And he walked off. Green flag goes up. The first beep starts, which is the 12-second countdown. That gives both riders, myself and the guy on the other side of the track, 12 seconds to focus, prepare, relax, ready for the gun when it goes off, And I'll never forget feeling just so relaxed and having nothing in my head, empty. I mean, completely empty, completely relaxed, like you're chilling on a beach.
Yeah.
Just relaxed. I'm just thinking to myself, I'm just going to follow the schedule that we'd practiced. Because remember, in the morning, broke the world record. I'm just going to repeat the process. I don't care how much it hurts, because pain basically dissipates. It goes, And the beeps counted down. The gun went off. I wound the bike up, got it up to 50k an hour. And lap 3, you settle. And then it's time to hurt yourself. Even though it's controlled pain, it's only short term. It's only for 3.5 minutes, when you wound the bike up. And I'll never forget being on schedule. Every lap I came around metronomically, 19 seconds. And then on lap 10, I came around the corner, and as I looked up the track, I could just see this rider at the end of the track. Now, the rider should be 180 degrees over there somewhere, but he's literally, ahead of me. And I'll never forget this moment as long as I live. A little voice in my head said, you've won. I just needed to stay upright, So lap 10 came and went, lap 11, and as I'm coming around on, the last but one lap, my coach Tom is on the side of the track screaming, catch him. So then it was just time to empty the tank then, give it full gas, 202 beats per minute on the heart rate. My head was pounding, my chest just felt like it was going to explode. And I'd almost accepted that my legs were burning and hurting, as much as what it did in training, really, And then crossing the start-finish line, probably 30 meters behind this rider, and I could actually feel the slipstream on my face. That's how close I was. And looking up at the scoreboard and just seeing the 2 letters WR, world record, I was like, what? Again? Wow.
Twice in one day.
Twice in one day in the same event on the same track. It was incredible. But my whole point around sharing that story is not to impress you, but to impress on you that if you continue to give 100%, you never know what's going to happen. What if on lap 11, I'd backed off? What if I'd feathered the pedals, slowed the RPM down and backed off and just coasted around? Yes, I would have won if I'd stayed upright, of course. But I would have never have achieved something that even in the history of cycling, it doesn't happen. It's very rare it happens twice in one day, And even Phil Liggett, who was the wonderful commentator, came on to me afterwards and he said, I've been doing this 30 years, Mark. And that's probably top 5 in the best races I've ever commentated on, So that was a privilege for me, it really was.
I could keep talking to you about this all day, but we do, in the interest of time, have to kind of start to bring the bicycle home. One question before I just kind of want to get some closing thoughts from you. What did it feel like when that slipped around your neck?
So the first feeling coming off the track was the feeling of it's over, job's done, the end of the shift. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Okay, it was the end of the shift. And that may be a great metaphor, for people all around the world who's listening and watching this podcast. The time doesn't stand still. Okay? So the feeling of, it's over. Okay? The feeling of achievement and then waiting to have the medal. The national anthem playing, being stood on the podium, almost with a feeling of, is this real? Am I really here? Am I going to wake up in a few minutes, you know? And then having that medal draped round your neck. And the first thing I kept thinking of was obviously my dad, my mum, my daughter that was in the audience. And then thinking to myself, I've just put myself in the history books. Okay? I put myself in the history books. That was the thought that was going through my mind. And how many people are going to learn from what I've been through? Okay? Not to inspire people, but to teach people how to inspire themselves. Okay? And I get asked this quite a lot. What's your why? Why did you do what you did? Probably because of my dad and my mum. You know, they were my drivers. And my daughter, of course. And just knowing that I have to do it now. And I have to give it 100%. Because the one thing you do live with, if you don't give 100%, is the internal regret that you've lied to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay? So that feeling, and I've used this as an analogy in schools and conferences now, the feeling of having that draped around your neck is the same feeling as your birthday, Christmas, bank holiday, Valentine's, wedding anniversaries, all rolled into a bag full of feelings. Joy, you know, this ecstatic feeling we get when we celebrate something, you know. And yes, it was a moment in time that, you know, I'll probably never ever forget, you know. And it's great now as a conference speaker, as a facilitating coach, because every time that I speak or I present or coach and I play the race, okay, imagine how my body feels. Now we're 10, 11 years on from London, and every time those beeps count down, my legs prep. I can feel my left foot, you know, literally preloading the pedal. You know, beep, beep. And I'm like, calm down, Mark, calm down. So yeah, great moment in time.
You have kindly agreed to be a judge for the Mentl Awards 2023. And for anyone watching who doesn't know about the Mentl Awards 2023, so completely independent, which jury-led, and we've got an amazing lineup of judges with individuals such as Mark. It's there to celebrate and hero organizations, public sector, private sector, individuals, projects, non-profits, charities, anyone in any industry that's doing good work to help people thrive. And one of those categories as well in there is obviously projects within the sports and fitness and wellness industry. Give us your thoughts on what sports has given you in terms of your mental health, because we're increasingly reading that actually they're not two systems, they're one system. And actually the first thing that some doctors are now prescribing to people with mental health issues and mental health challenges is go for the walk, go for the run, get into the exercise.
Movement.
Yeah. Give us just how important movement is to you and how it's helped you and your mental health along this incredible journey.
Well, I studied sports science when I was in college, and that gave me the understanding of physiology. It gave me the understanding that the 5 systems that we have as human beings, and one of those, you know, systems is your cardiovascular system, which then links to your respiratory, your digestive, your repair, you know, all of those systems in our bodies that, believe it or not, work better through movement. So it's only probably, I'm just going to assume the last sort of 40 years, we've had sedentary jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, the sedentary lifestyle. Now, I'm not knocking it because I did it for a long time myself. So I've had that experience of sitting in a chair, managing teams, or in a car for hours and hours and hours, okay? And I just felt this whole lowering of my health, okay? The metabolism lowering, my thoughts, my energy. And my point is that even now at the age of 53, I'm still cycling 250 kilometers a week, okay?
Decent.
It's not bad considering only half my legs work, okay? But my point is, I know in my heart that movement is as important as breathing, okay? So movement is as important as oxygen. That's important as hydration. Obviously good, healthy food, etc., etc. But what does it do for our bodies? And what does it do for all of the pillars of health that we almost expect to happen? Just because you have a pulse, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of your pillars are on point. So when it comes to mental health and mental stability, in my opinion, the easiest thing to do, remember, disabled, person of determination, it's my choice to cycle 250 kilometers a week, okay? I take control over the inner voice to go and cycle, but also at the same time coach people, okay? So my group coaching sessions, I'm riding, remember, with a disability and coaching. So I'm doing two things. I'm helping my own mental stability, my own physical health that leads into my mental health, and I'm giving back. It's a win-win situation, you know? So I think what's so important for people, if they've not experienced it, is to just go and do something. Doesn't have to be hundreds of K on the bike or, I don't know, 20 or 30 K a week on the rower or swimming, or just go and move. Because our bodies, we were made to move. Everything in our body works so much better when we move. Get the heart pumping. You know, it pumps for a reason, to repair the rest of us. And that includes, you know, your mental state as well. Because in my opinion, you know, if you don't have anything to do, you rust from the inside.
We stay with my last question on sort of mental health. Tell me about Dave.
Dave, okay. So, I'll take you all the way back to when I was in hospital, first of all, so you get the full picture. As your audience knows, I spent 94 days on my back, not knowing if I was going to have a life. And it got to the point where, even looking back now, and I'm happy to share this, I almost snapped. To the point where my parents came to visit me one evening, and I'll never forget my mum saying to my dad, "I'm just going to nip to the bathroom, and when I come back, we'll have to make a move because it's an hour's drive home from Cardiff." So my mum went to the bathroom, and my late father drew the curtain around the bed. Now at this point, I couldn't stop crying. I'd been crying every day for weeks. I felt I was bordering on depression, and it got to the point where I just thought, I can't do this. That's how I felt. I just couldn't do it. And I said to my dad, "Do you know what? I don't think I can do this anymore." I knew about euthanasia. I knew about Holland. I knew about the injection. And yet I'd never shared it. And I said to my dad, "Do you know what? I've had enough. Just take my money out to the bank, book me a flight, and just get it over and done with. Because surely then, by going into that realm is better than where I am. Surely, you know? Oh, if I did." My dad caught hold of me. And my dad was known as Mr. Nice Guy. He was a gentleman. I mean, true gentleman. And he grabbed hold of me, and he was like the Incredible Hulk. He said, "You listen to me now. You're going to get through this. You stop upsetting your mum. You stop upsetting me. You pull yourself together because you're a winner. Are you listening to me?" Well, you can imagine, I'm crying. I'm scared. I'm lying in this hospital bed with a broken back. I'm not going anywhere. I can't run away. And he said, "No, please stop it. Now, don't tell your mum we've had this conversation. Okay, you listening?" And he pulled the curtain back. Here comes my mum. "All right, yeah, okay, let's go then. See you tomorrow, bye." My mum never knew about the conversation. But what it was the pattern interrupt to take me out of the situation I was in, to give me the self-confidence and self-belief that I could at least have a life, whatever life that was going to be. So that voice in my head that said to me, "Just have the injection, Mark. Just get it over and done with," okay, was not the logical thinking human, which was Mark, because I love life. I didn't want to die, okay? But it was the inner primate voice. So when I joined British Cycling, and obviously worked with Professor Steve Peters, who trains you on how to manage the inner voice. You can't get rid of it. You can't just press a button and it's gone. It's with you. It's been with you all your life. In fact, it was there before you were born. But how you manage it. And Professor Peter said to me, look, to manage it, you have to understand that the human needs to take control when you're having these thoughts. But you need to give your inner voice a name. I said, who's the crazy one here? I said, what's the reason? He said, because that voice will talk to you, but you have to negotiate with it. You have to feed it facts, not bananas. So Professor Peters calls the inner voice the chimp.
Yeah.
So my inner voice's name is Dave. And I remember speaking at a facilitation coaching event, and I didn't know this, and it was so funny. Spoke to all the team that was there, 40 the staff, and showed them the picture that you saw the other day of my inner voice. He's a cheeky chappy, is our Dave. And I said, let me introduce you to Dave. Well, all of these, the audience, they all fell about laughing. And I was like, why are they laughing? The chief exec's name was Dave. And I didn't know. So yeah, it's...
How's your relationship with Dave today?
Predominantly, he's very quiet, okay? Because I manage my day-to-day activities to do what I enjoy. I live a very simple life, even though, yes, I'm living in an amazing city of Dubai.
Yeah.
The life I lead is to give back, to educate, other people, help other people on their journey. I've already achieved my dream.
Yeah.
So it's very rare that Dave, raises his head. But when he does, I take control, and I feed the facts to Dave to say, Dave, I'm okay, I'm safe. Okay, I'm safe. Everything's fine. I'm in control. And that's how you cage the chimp.
That feels like a mic drop moment. Mark and Dave, thank you so much for your time on the podcast today. Again, just to remind you all, Mark is one of the judges of our awards, and this is the caliber of the judges that we have on the Mentl Awards 2023. So please, if you are doing work that helps people thrive, then take a look at our website. You can find us at mentl, mentl awards.com, or come visit our website, mentl space, which is mentl.space, and you'll find all the details there. One more time, Mark, such an inspiring conversation, so thank you very much.
My pleasure, and hopefully, the audience, listening and watching all around the world, will obviously will share this, to people that they know, like, and love and trust. So, we can help them on their journey. So once again, thank you.